Hello, welcome to Telecom TV. My name is Tony Chan, and with me today is Pradeep Sen, who is the CTO of NFV at the Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Pradeep, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
What do you think is the key to success for commercial NFV deployments, and how do you see the open source community and OPNFV in particular plays into that?
Yes, the NFV, deploying NFV is a major transformation in carrier networks and communication service provider networks. It's new technology, but also new processes are involved, new ways of thinking about how you operate networks. And it requires a certain degree of familiarity with the new approaches. And so I think the key to deployment is really, one of them is getting carriers educated about the new approaches and the new technology and gaining more experience with it. And in this, for this purpose, open source organizations and OPNFV in particular is very suited for this, because carriers who get involved can actually get hands-on experience with the new kind of software-based systems, how they're installed, how they get integrated with other pieces, how they get tested. So I think it's an excellent education and learning opportunity. Operators are already involved in this, but I think getting some of the operations personnel from the operators involved in this earlier would be beneficial, because there is a fear factor among operations individuals who don't want to change what they're doing, and this would make things a little easier. The second thing, which is a key to getting NFV deployed, is making the business case, and that, for many reasons, is always a hard thing to do. Largely because the business case for something like NFV, which is a totally new approach, is based on total cost of ownership over a period of time, covering CapEx, OpEx, everything. And for any vendor or supplier to build a business case from the outside is very hard. That has to be built by the individuals within the operators themselves. And so they're getting involved in this kind of project like OPNFV, exposes them to the systems and allows them familiarity enough to start to build those business cases.
I think OPNFV has been around for 3 years or so. During that time, there's many different open source initiatives and projects that have sprouted up. Do you see a need for harmonization between?
There's definitely a need for harmonization. In fact, some of that has happened. In 2016, there were several orchestration projects which had started up. And many of us who've been working in the industry were talking to folks and encouraging them to try and consolidate and coordinate, because we saw there was a fracturing happening. So the good thing is all of those conversations seem to have borne some fruit, and eventually we did get consolidation of two of the major ones into what is now ONAP. So I think that's a great start. So there is this balance between trying to consolidate and harmonize projects with not stifling innovation. You do want alternate approaches to come up so people can look at them and evaluate them. But I think the way to do that is perhaps within the framework of umbrella projects. So, like ONAP has a domain it is looking at now. Within that, there should be room for different technologies and different approaches, so projects with different approaches to germinate. But creating new large projects which cover the same domain doesn't seem to be useful.
And how does OPNFV play in this environment?
Right. So OPNFV, because it's largely an integration and testing project, that's its purpose, to put all of these pieces together to create a reference platform. It's ideally suited for this harmonization because in the very nature of which pieces it sees is easy to integrate or otherwise, and which options it allows, it automatically sort of communicates to the industry that perhaps these things are possible to live side by side, and perhaps this is not because it's not being considered in this project. So I think it's a natural place where it cannot do the consolidation of these projects or harmonization, but it can provide indicators of how to do it.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about security. Sometimes security and open source in the same sentence seems a contradiction in terms. How does HPE kind of deal with security with open source?
So if we just step back a bit to the ETSI and NFV working group, ISG, which started a few years ago, there was a security working group there which looked at this problem from the beginning, but it was not looking at open source per se, it was looking at NFV. And there were several reports published, but basically they realized that the NFV approach, which people were concerned would introduce new security vulnerabilities, was not any different from any other system building approach, and all the same security concerns that you have with any system apply here. So following the best practices for those are fine. And in fact, they found that because of virtualization, you can do some things which can improve the security of the overall system. So given that as a backdrop, HP itself in the systems we built for NFV, etc., we took security at every level, following the best practices we had for how you build software, how you build hardware, what kind of traceability and security you have there. So those things were built into the system. And then we tried to follow some of the ETSI recommendations for the NFV system software. But open source is a little, is a sort of slightly different matter. People do have some concerns about the stability of open source, the security of open source, all of those things. But in fact, open source by its very nature is perhaps a little less prone to security and stability concerns, and because it's open, there's so many eyes looking at it, people find security vulnerabilities much earlier, people fix them much earlier, same with bugs and stabilizing the software, than a closed system which, you know, you build a closed system and it's out there, and until something happens, nobody really looks at it. This, in open source, people are constantly looking at the software, trying it out, and you know, testing it in various ways, adding to it in various ways. And so I feel it is a place where this security and stability concerns are perhaps less of a concern. Again, I'm making a blanket statement. You know, in the details there could be variations, but in general, I think that's what's true.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.